The grand amphitheater of the galactic Concordat buzzed with anticipation. Crystalline structures caught the light of 3 suns, casting rainbow shadows across the assembled delegates from 1,000 worlds. Commander Isabella Reyes stood in the shadows of the preparation chamber, her dark eyes fixed on the holographic displays showing the main stage. The Vraxian delegate had just finished showcasing their quantum disruption field, a weapon that could theoretically unravel matter at the subatomic level. The applause was deafening, echoing through the chamber like thunder. Isabella allowed herself a small smile. Let them celebrate their elegant weapons. They had no idea what was coming. "Commander, they're ready for us," Lieutenant James O'Neill reported, his voice steady despite the pressure. Behind him, the maintenance crew made final adjustments to what looked like an oversized metal container draped in stealth fabric. Isabella nodded, straightening her midnight blue uniform adorned with the insignia of the Terran Defense Force. Status of the Thunderstrike? All systems green. Power cells at maximum capacity. Targeting systems calibrated. The announcer's voice boomed through the chamber. Next presentation, Earth's Terran Defense Force. The response was immediate, not applause, but laughter. Whispers and chuckles rippled through the audience like waves across a pond. Isabella had expected this. Humanity was the newest member of the Galactic Concordat, seen as primitive upstarts who had barely mastered faster-than-light travel. "Look at them, still using projectile weapons," a Centaurian diplomat sneered, their bioluminescent patches flashing with amusement. "How quaint." High Admiral Zvax of the Draconian Empire leaned forward in his hover throne, scales glittering under the artificial light. "Perhaps they will show us how to make fire next," he said, earning more laughter from his entourage. Isabella stepped onto the stage, her boots silent against the quantum-stabilized platform. The maintenance crew followed, pushing their covered cargo. She took her position at the podium, face impassive as she surveyed the audience. "Distinguished delegates of the Concordat," she began, her voice clear and strong. "For centuries, weapons development has focused on energy projection, quantum manipulation, and gravitational distortion. Today, we present something different." She gestured, and the stealth fabric fell away, revealing what appeared to be a massive, angular weapon mount. Its surface was matte black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. 6 barrels arranged in a circular pattern protruded from the front, each one seemingly crafted from some unknown alloy. The laughter grew louder. "Is that a primitive rotary cannon?" High Admiral Zvax's voice dripped with disdain. "Humanity truly is stuck in its barbaric past." Isabella continued, unperturbed. "This is the XM-4000 Thunderstrike. It represents a fusion of human ingenuity with advanced material science. While other species abandoned kinetic weapons in favor of energy-based systems, we perfected them." She touched a control panel, and the weapon hummed to life. Holographic displays materialized around it, showing real-time diagnostics and targeting data. The Thunderstrike operates at 15,000 rounds per minute. Each projectile is crafted from a nanomaterial composite and accelerated to near-relativistic speeds. But the true innovation lies in what happens at the point of impact. A Medusan scientist raised their tentacles in objection. "Impossible. No mechanical system could achieve such rates of fire without immediate failure. The heat generation alone would dash." Isabella cut them off by activating the targeting range. A series of defensive barriers materialized downrange, standard energy shields, quantum barriers, and even a miniature gravitational distortion field. Perhaps a demonstration would be more convincing than technical specifications. She nodded to Lieutenant O'Neill, who took position at the weapons control station. The Thunderstrike's barrels began to spin, slowly at first, then faster. There was no sound, the weapon had been designed to operate in complete silence. The only indication of its activation was a slight distortion in the air around the barrels, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. 15,000 rounds per minute, Isabella repeated. Each one carrying enough kinetic energy to punch through a small moon. But it's not the individual impacts that matter, it's the cumulative effect. She pressed another control, and the Thunderstrike opened fire. The effect was immediate and devastating. The first barrier, a standard energy shield, didn't just fail, it shattered. The continuous stream of hypervelocity projectiles overwhelmed its regenerative capabilities in microseconds. The quantum barrier behind it lasted slightly longer, almost 2 full seconds before collapsing in a spectacular display of light and energy. The gravitational distortion field, pride of the Draconian Empire's defensive technology, tried to deflect the incoming fire. For a moment, the streams of projectiles bent and twisted in impossible ways. Then the sheer volume of fire overwhelmed the field generators, and the barrier evaporated like morning dew under a plasma torch. When Isabella finally powered down the weapon, the silence in the amphitheater was absolute. Every delegate, from the most militant to the most scholarly, stared at the destruction with a mixture of awe and horror. High Admiral Zvax had risen from his hover throne, his scales now a pale shade of gray. This is not warfare," he managed to say. "This is annihilation." "No, Admiral," Isabella corrected him. "This is humanity's answer to being underestimated. We may be new to the galactic stage, but we have perfected the art of warfare through millennia of conflict. While other species focused on elegance, we focused on effectiveness." She gestured to the smoking ruins of the defensive barriers. The Thunderstrike doesn't rely on exotic physics or quantum manipulation. It operates on a simple principle: overwhelming force applied with precise control. No shield can withstand it because it wasn't designed to break shields, it was designed to render the concept of shields meaningless. The Medusan scientist who had objected earlier raised their tentacles again, but this time in a gesture of respect. The heat management alone, the engineering required, most impressive. Isabella allowed herself a small smile. "Thank you. And this is just the beginning. The Thunderstrike is our first offering to the Concordat's defensive initiatives. We have more designs in development, each one combining human pragmatism with advanced technology." As the implications sank in, the atmosphere in the amphitheater changed. The dismissive attitudes and superior smirks were replaced by thoughtful expressions and concerned whispers. Humanity had just demonstrated that they weren't just catching up to galactic standards, they were rewriting them. "Commander Reyes," High Admiral Zvax called out, his voice carrying across the chamber. "I believe I owe you an apology. We have clearly underestimated humanity's capabilities." Isabella inclined her head in acknowledgement. "No apology needed, Admiral. We're used to being underestimated. It makes our victories all the sweeter." 9 months earlier, deep within the Terran Defense Force's research complex Omega on Mars, Marcus Blackwood stood before the twisted remains of another failed prototype, his weathered face illuminated by the red emergency lights. Smoke still curled from the testing chamber, where the latest iteration of the Thunderstrike had torn itself apart after just 30 seconds of sustained fire. He ran a hand through his graying hair, the holocom in his cybernetic eye automatically recording the destruction for later analysis. "The heat distribution is still our primary obstacle," a melodic voice observed from behind him. Dr. Kthara moved into view, her crystalline form catching the light and refracting it in complex patterns. The Luminian scientist had been assigned to the project as part of the Galactic Concordat's technology exchange program, though most assumed she was there to monitor humanity's primitive attempts at advanced weapons development. Marcus turned to face his unlikely partner. "The barrel assembly held this time. It's the ammunition feed system that couldn't handle the stress. We're pushing the materials beyond their theoretical limits." Kthara's crystalline structure shifted, a sign of deep thought among her species. "Perhaps we are approaching this from the wrong direction. Your species has always fascinated me, Marcus. You don't seek to transcend physical limitations, you embrace them, force them to bend to your will. She gestured at the wreckage. Every other species abandoned kinetic weapons because we reached what we believed were insurmountable physical constraints. But humans see constraints as challenges. Marcus walked to his workstation, bringing up holographic schematics of the Thunderstrike's internal mechanisms. The principle is sound. We're not trying to match energy weapons for elegance. We're going for pure, overwhelming force. Quantity has a quality all its own. An interesting human phrase, Kthara noted, moving to study the schematics. Her crystalline fingers traced the holographic lines. You know, on my world, we have a saying, the path of least resistance leads to stagnation. I never truly understood it until I began working with humans. The door to the lab slid open, admitting Commander Reyes. She surveyed the damage with a practiced eye. Another setback? A step forward, Marcus corrected. Each failure teaches us something new. We've eliminated 3 more potential points of catastrophic failure. Isabella moved to join them at the workstation. The Galactic Defense Summit is in 6 months. The Draconians are pushing for our exclusion from the defense contracts, claiming we're too technologically primitive to contribute meaningfully. Kthara's crystalline structure flashed with what humans had learned to recognize as amusement. They fear what they don't understand. The Draconian Empire has dominated defense contracts for 3 centuries through their mastery of energy weapons and shield technology. Human innovation threatens their supremacy. Marcus manipulated the hologram, zooming in on the ammunition feed system. What if we stop trying to fight the heat, he mused. Instead of complex cooling systems, what if we used the heat itself? Kthara's structure brightened, the equivalent of raised eyebrows among her species. Elaborate. We've been treating the heat as an enemy, something to be controlled and dissipated. But what if it's actually the key? Marcus's fingers flew over the controls, modifying the design. Look at how plasma weapons work, they use contained heat to enhance their effectiveness. We could do the same with kinetic projectiles. Commander Reyes leaned forward, studying the modifications. You're suggesting we use the heat generated by the firing rate to enhance the projectile's effectiveness? Exactly. Marcus's cybernetic eye glowed as he ran rapid calculations. The heat doesn't have to be our enemy. We can use it to partially phase shift the projectiles just before they leave the barrel. Not enough to make them unstable, but enough to give them properties that no conventional shield is designed to handle. Kthara's entire form pulsed with excitement. Brilliant. No wonder your species survived despite your violent history. You don't just solve problems, you transform them into advantages. The next 3 months were a blur of activity. Marcus and Kthara worked tirelessly, their collaboration breaking new ground in weapons development. Traditional barriers between kinetic and energy weapons began to blur as they incorporated elements of both into the Thunderstrike's design. The breakthrough came during test firing number 2847. The prototype maintained stability through a full minute of continuous fire, its hypervelocity rounds carrying a phase-shifted energy signature that allowed them to partially bypass conventional shields while maintaining their devastating kinetic impact. It's beautiful, Kthara whispered as they watched the weapon perform. Not in the way my people define beauty through symmetry and light, but in its raw, primal effectiveness. You humans have taught me that there can be elegance in brutality. Marcus nodded, watching the test results scroll across his cybernetic display. And you've taught us that we don't have to choose between power and precision. The phase-shifting technology you helped develop has turned a brute force weapon into something revolutionary. Commander Reyes stepped into the observation booth, her face lit by the glow of the test firing. The Concordat's Defense Committee has confirmed our slot at the summit. We'll be presenting right after the Draconian Empire's showcase of their latest shield technology. A smile tugged at her lips. Their timing couldn't be better. They still think we're going to embarrass ourselves, Marcus said, shutting down the test sequence. They expect us to will out some primitive projectile weapon and prove their superiority. Kthara's crystalline form shimmered with what they now recognized as her version of a laugh. They forget that humanity's greatest strength isn't in your technology, it's in your ability to take existing principles and combine them in ways no one else would dare to try. As they prepared the Thunderstrike for transport to the summit, Kthara approached Marcus privately. You know, when I was assigned to this project, many of my colleagues pitied me. They thought babysitting human engineers would be a career setback. She paused, her structure refracting light in complex patterns. I need to thank you for showing me how wrong they were. Marcus looked up from his final calibrations. And I need to thank you for believing in this project when everyone else thought we were chasing an impossible dream. The Thunderstrike isn't just a weapon, it's proof that different species, different approaches to physics and engineering, can come together to create something unprecedented. The weapon was loaded onto a transport vessel, its true capabilities still a closely guarded secret. As they watched it being secured for the journey to the summit, Commander Reyes stood with her team. Whatever happens at the summit, she said quietly, we've already achieved something remarkable. We've proven that humanity doesn't need to abandon its strengths to compete on the galactic stage. We just needed to evolve them. The reception hall of the Galactic Concordat's Grand Amphitheater buzzed with tension following the Thunderstrike demonstration. Delegates gathered in small clusters, their conversations a mix of worried whispers and heated debates. Commander Isabella Reyes stood at the edge of the gathering, watching the political fallout unfold with careful attention. High Admiral Zvax's scales had shifted to a deep crimson, a sign of agitation among the Draconians. He moved through the crowd with deliberate grace, his cybernetic tail lashing behind him as he approached the human delegation. Quite a performance, Commander, he said, his voice carrying just enough volume to draw attention. Though I wonder if your weapon's effectiveness might be, somewhat exaggerated by controlled conditions. Lieutenant O'Neill tensed beside Isabella, but she remained calm. The demonstration spoke for itself, Admiral. The results are recorded and verified by Concordat observers. Ah, yes. Zvax's tongue flicked out, tasting the air. But laboratory conditions rarely match the realities of actual combat. Perhaps a more practical demonstration would be in order? The surrounding conversations quieted as delegates turned to watch the exchange. Dr. Kthara moved closer to the human delegation, her crystalline form pulsing with concern. What exactly are you suggesting, Admiral? Isabella asked, though she already knew where this was heading. Zvax's mandibles clicked in what passed for a smile among his species. A challenge, Commander. The Draconian Empire's latest defensive system against your Thunderstrike. Live-fire conditions, no controlled environments. Let's see how your primitive kinetics fare against real shield technology. Marcus Blackwood stepped forward, his cybernetic eye whirring as it analyzed the Admiral's body language. The Thunderstrike has already proven its capabilities. This sounds more like an attempt to salvage wounded pride than scientific inquiry. Careful, human, one of Zvax's subordinates hissed. You forget your place in the galactic order. Do we? Isabella's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Because from where I stand, the order seems to be shifting. The Draconians have dominated defense contracts through monopolizing shield technology. Now that someone has developed a counter to those shields, suddenly there are calls for additional testing. The Medusan scientist from earlier raised their tentacles in a gesture of mediation. Perhaps this challenge could serve a legitimate purpose. A practical demonstration would provide valuable data for all parties involved. Kthara's crystalline structure flashed with patterns that indicated skepticism. Or it could be an attempt to discredit Earth's contribution to galactic defense technology. The political implications are obvious. Are you refusing the challenge? Zvax pressed, his cybernetic enhancements humming with barely contained energy. Perhaps humans lack the conviction to back their claims when true verification is demanded. Isabella felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her. This was more than a simple weapons demonstration now, it had become a test of humanity's place in the galactic community. She glanced at Marcus, who gave her a subtle nod. They had prepared for something like this. "We accept," Isabella declared, her voice carrying across the hall. "But let's make this interesting, Admiral. If the Thunderstrike performs as demonstrated, the Draconian Empire will publicly acknowledge Earth's right to compete for defense contracts on equal footing." Zvax's scales rippled with colors of surprise and calculation. "And if your weapon fails to penetrate our shields? Then Earth will withdraw its bid for the upcoming defense contracts and acknowledge Draconian superiority in weapons technology." Isabella's statement caused gasps among the delegates. "Commander," Marcus whispered urgently, "that's a significant risk. The entire future of Earth's defense industry is already at stake," Isabella finished for him. "They'll find ways to block us politically if we don't prove ourselves now. Better to force the issue on our terms." Zvax considered the terms, his cybernetic implants processing possible outcomes. "Agreed. The challenge will take place tomorrow at the Concordat's military testing grounds. We will bring our latest shield array, the same technology we're proposing for the next generation of defensive contracts." As the delegates dispersed, discussing the upcoming challenge with growing excitement, Kthara approached the human team. "They're planning something," she said, her crystalline form displaying patterns of worry. "The Draconians never issue challenges unless they're certain of victory." Marcus nodded, pulling up holographic schematics of the Thunderstrike. "They probably think they've identified a weakness in our design. We need to prepare for anything." "No," Isabella corrected him. "We need to prepare for everything. Lieutenant O'Neill, begin a full diagnostic of the Thunderstrike systems. Dr. Kthara, we'll need your expertise on Draconian shield technology. Marcus, prepare contingency modifications for any possible countermeasures they might employ." As the team dispersed to their tasks, Isabella remained in the reception hall, watching Admiral Zvax's retreating form. The Draconian cybernetic tail swished with satisfaction, and she could have sworn she saw his scales shift to a pattern indicating amusement. "They think they're setting a trap," she murmured to herself. "They forget that humans have turned trap setting into an art form over millennia of warfare. Tomorrow will decide more than just weapons contracts, it will determine whether humanity remains on the fringes of galactic society or steps forward as equals." In the preparation chamber below the testing grounds, Marcus worked through the night with Kthara, making subtle adjustments to the Thunderstrike systems. "They'll try to analyze our weapon signature," he explained, his cybernetic eye projecting calculations into the air. "They'll expect us to use the same configurations as today's demonstration." Kthara's crystalline form pulsed with understanding. "So we give them what they expect to see, while hiding what they don't know to look for. Very human of you, Marcus." "The best deception," he replied with a grim smile, "is the one that looks exactly like what your opponent expects to find." Dawn broke over the Concordat's military testing grounds, 3 suns painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. The massive arena had been configured for the challenge, its quantum-stabilized walls calibrated to contain any level of weapons discharge. Thousands of delegates filled the observation galleries, their excitement palpable. Commander Isabella Reyes stood at the control station, watching as Draconian engineers made final adjustments to their shield array. The device was impressive, a lattice network of crystalline nodes and energy conduits that hummed with barely contained power. Its surface rippled with protective fields that bent light itself. "Their confidence concerns me," Lieutenant O'Neill muttered, monitoring the Thunderstrike's diagnostics. "They've added something new to their shield design." Marcus nodded, his cybernetic eye scanning the Draconian device. 3 layers of quantum-locked energy fields, powered by what looks like a miniature singularity core. They've essentially created a mobile fortress shield. Good, Isabella replied, surprising her team. The harder their shield, the more impressive it will be when we break it. High Admiral Zvax approached, flanked by his technical team. His scales now shimmered with a pattern that indicated absolute certainty. I trust you've had time to prepare your weapon, Commander. We wouldn't want any excuses when your primitive technology fails. The Thunderstrike is ready, Admiral. Isabella's voice carried across the arena. Though I notice you've brought quite an impressive shield array. One might think you're worried about our primitive technology. Zvax's mandibles clicked in amusement. This shield array represents the pinnacle of draconian engineering. It can withstand sustained fire from a capital ship's main battery. Your kinetic weapon, impressive as it seemed yesterday, will barely register. The Concordat's chief observer, a towering archelon with crystalline scales, stepped forward. The terms of the challenge are simple. The human weapon will engage the draconian shield array at progressively closer ranges. Shield integrity will be monitored continuously. If at any point the shield fails, the humans win. If the shield holds through all range increments, the draconians win. Isabella took her position at the control station, while Zvax moved to his shield array's command center. The air crackled with tension as final preparations were made. Initial range, 2,000 meters, the observer announced. You may begin when ready. Isabella nodded to Marcus, who had made some final, subtle adjustments to the Thunderstrike during the night. Let's show them what humanity can do. Lieutenant O'Neill, commence firing sequence. The Thunderstrike's barrels began their silent spin, building to full speed. The air around them shimmered with contained energy, a new effect that hadn't been present during yesterday's demonstration. Zvax noticed this, his scales flickering with momentary concern. Full power to forward shields, he commanded, his cybernetic implants interfacing directly with the shield array. The defensive barrier brightened, its surface becoming almost opaque with energy. Isabella's finger hovered over the firing control. Sometimes, she said, loud enough for Zvax to hear, the best way to win isn't to break through a wall, it's to change the rules of engagement. She pressed the trigger. The Thunderstrike erupted, but something was different. Instead of the straight streams of hypervelocity rounds from yesterday's demonstration, the weapon now fired in a complex, spiraling pattern. The projectiles seemed to phase in and out of normal space, leaving trails of distorted reality in their wake. Zvax's scales paled. Impossible. They've modified the weapon's firing pattern. The first wave of rounds struck the shield, not as individual impacts, but as a coordinated assault that created interference patterns in the quantum-locked energy field. Where single impacts would have been absorbed, the synchronized strikes began to create resonance points in the shield's matrix. Fascinating, the Medusan scientist exclaimed from the observation gallery. They're not trying to overpower the shield, they're exploiting its own energy distribution patterns. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Remember what you said about humans embracing physical limitations, Kthara? We didn't just improve the weapon. We studied how shields work and found their fundamental weakness. The shield array's surface began to ripple unnaturally as the Thunderstrike's fire continued. Each spiral of projectiles struck at precisely calculated points, turning the shield's strength against itself. The quantum-locked energy field began to generate harmonic frequencies that interfered with its own stability. Reduce range to 1,000 meters, the observer commanded. At closer range, the effect became even more pronounced. The Thunderstrike's modified firing pattern created cascading failures in the shield's energy distribution network. Alerts blared from the draconian control station as their engineers frantically tried to compensate. Reroute power through the secondary matrices. Zvax ordered, his composure cracking. Activate the emergency stabilizers. But it was too late. The harmonic resonance had spread throughout the entire shield array. Where brute force would have failed, precisely calculated interference patterns were causing the shield to tear itself apart from within. Shield integrity at 40% and falling, the observer announced. 30%, 20. With a sound like shattering crystal, the mighty draconian shield array collapsed. Its energy field imploded, leaving only the smoking hardware behind. The silence that followed was absolute. Isabella powered down the thunderstrike, its barrels slowly spinning to a stop. And that, Admiral, is why you should never underestimate human ingenuity. We didn't just build a better weapon, we found a better way to use it. Zvax stood amid the ruins of his shield technology, his scales cycling through colors of shock, rage, and finally, grudging respect. How? He demanded. How did you know this would work? Marcus stepped forward. We spent months studying shield technology, learning its fundamental principles. Every defense has a weakness, not in its strength, but in how that strength is maintained. Your shields were practically impenetrable to direct assault, so we didn't try to penetrate them. We made them collapse themselves. The spiraling fire pattern, Kthara added, her crystalline form gleaming with pride, was designed to create specific resonance frequencies in quantum-locked energy fields. The thunderstrike wasn't just firing projectiles, it was conducting an orchestra of destruction, using your shield's own energy as the instrument. The observer raised their arms for attention. The challenge is concluded. The human weapon has definitively defeated the draconian shield array. As per the agreed terms, the Draconian Empire must acknowledge Earth's right to compete for defense contracts as equals. The aftermath of the challenge reverberated through the halls of the Galactic Concordat like shockwaves from a supernova. In the Grand Conference Chamber, representatives from 100 species gathered for what would become a historic session. Commander Isabella Reyes stood before the assembly, her midnight blue uniform adorned with a new insignia, the Concordat's mark of technical achievement. High Admiral Zvax approached the central podium, his scales now a deep blue of formal ceremony. The cybernetic implants along his spine pulsed with measured energy as he addressed the assembly. For 3 centuries, he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber, the Draconian Empire has led the galaxy in defensive technology. Yesterday, that supremacy was not just challenged, it was fundamentally transformed. Humanity has proven that true innovation comes not from perfecting the expected, but from daring to imagine the impossible. In the audience, Marcus Blackwood sat beside Kthara, whose crystalline form reflected the chamber's lights in complex patterns of pride and satisfaction. The Thunderstrike's success had done more than win a weapons contract, it had changed how the galaxy viewed human potential. The terms of our challenge have been met, Zvax continued. But I stand here to offer more than mere acknowledgement of humanity's achievement. The Draconian Empire formally proposes a joint defense initiative, combining our shield technology with human weapons innovation. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the assembly. Isabella exchanged glances with her team. This was unprecedented, the Draconians had never willingly shared their core technologies. The Medusan scientist who had observed the challenge rose, their tentacles weaving patterns of agreement. I second this proposal. What we witnessed was more than a weapon test, it was proof that different approaches to physics and engineering can combine to create something revolutionary. The humans didn't just defeat a shield, they expanded our understanding of how energy fields interact with kinetic forces. Lieutenant O'Neill leaned close to Isabella. They're not just respecting us now, they're studying us. Learning from us. Good, Isabella whispered back. Because we have so much more to show them. The Archilon chief observer stepped forward, their crystalline scales catching the light. The Concordat recognizes Earth's contribution to galactic defense technology. Furthermore, we propose the establishment of a new division within the Concordat's Research Council, the Department of Hybrid Technologies, to be jointly led by human and alien scientists. Marcus felt Kthara's crystalline hand touch his arm. They finally understand, she said softly. It was never about proving superiority. It was about showing that different perspectives, combined, create something greater than the sum of their parts. Isabella took the podium, facing the assembled delegates. Earth accepts these proposals with gratitude and anticipation. The thunderstrike was never meant to be just a weapon, it was meant to be a bridge. A demonstration that humanity's approach to problems, while different, has value. She gestured to Marcus and Cthara. The weapon's success was built on collaboration. A human engineer and a Luminian scientist, working together, discovered principles that neither species would have found alone. This is the real victory we celebrate today. High Admiral Zvax moved to stand beside her, a powerful symbolic gesture. Commander Reyes speaks wisdom. The Draconian Empire has learned that true strength lies not in maintaining supremacy, but in recognizing and embracing new possibilities. The humans have taught us that sometimes, the most elegant solution is the one that appears inelegant at first glance. The assembly chamber erupted in applause. Species that had once looked down on humanity as primitive now saw them in a new light. The thunderstrike had done more than pierce shields, it had shattered preconceptions. Later, in the celebration that followed, Isabella found herself in a quiet corner with her team. Marcus was explaining some of the weapon's principles to a group of fascinated alien engineers, while Cthara's crystalline form pulsed with joy as she discussed future collaborations. "You know," Lieutenant O'Neill said, watching the interactions, "when we first joined the Concordat, everyone treated us like children playing with sticks. Now they're all talking about the human perspective like it's the next big revelation in science." Isabella smiled. Because we showed them something they had forgotten, that progress doesn't always follow a straight line. Sometimes you have to step backward to leap forward. The thunderstrike succeeded not because it was more advanced, but because it approached the problem from an angle no one else considered. Across the room, Zvax was deep in discussion with Marcus about integrating draconian shield harmonics with human weapon systems. The Admiral's scales now showed patterns of genuine enthusiasm rather than diplomatic courtesy. "Commander," Cthara called, her crystalline form glowing with excitement, "the Research Council wants to begin work immediately on applying our resonance principles to other technologies. They're talking about revolutionizing everything from ship drives to communication systems." Isabella watched as humans and aliens mingled freely, sharing ideas and building connections that would shape the galaxy's future. The thunderstrike had done more than win humanity a place at the table, it had shown the galaxy that true progress comes from embracing different perspectives, from combining the wisdom of age with the daring of youth. "You know what the best part is?" Marcus said, joining them with a grin. "They're already asking what else we've been working on." The thunderstrike was just the beginning. As the celebration continued, Isabella looked out at the stars visible through the chamber's quantum crystalline windows. Humanity had proven itself not by conforming to galactic standards, but by staying true to its nature, adaptable, innovative, and unafraid to challenge conventional wisdom. The galaxy would never be the same. And somewhere out there, on distant worlds and in hidden laboratories, engineers and scientists of all species were looking at their work with new eyes, wondering what other impossible things might be possible if only they dared to think differently. The age of human innovation had begun, and the stars themselves seemed to shine brighter with anticipation.